Hi guys, it's Joey, and this is going to be a video on the joys of being solitary, and it is a video response to Judedirect's video, and it's also she did that video as a response to, I think it's Heidel's Corner. Am I saying that, or is it Heidel's Corner? I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. I had watched it, but my brain's just gone. So Jude directed a fantastic video on her experiences within group spaces and why that led to her preferring a solitary path as far as her pagan-y experience was concerned. I'm going to be sipping water throughout this. You have to forgive me, I'm a little bit under the weather because of this bug that Gnomes keeps bringing home. Okay. And I thought I would do a video response to, because the lady she'd done it for was interested in knowing the points of view, and I thought I would put across my point of view, which is to focus on the positives of being solitary, which often gets sidetracked, or sometimes it's so much easier to focus on the negatives of group spaces that we forget to really bring to the forefront the positives of solitary experiences. And I'm going to try my very best to focus on the positive aspects of being solitary versus, you know, not going on about the negative sides of group politics, which I fully agree with Jude. I've had that experience in a lot of group situations, and I tend to have avoided group situations with my spirituality, but with other groups in other things, I agree with how she put it. So I don't think my experience in that hasn't been any different. So, however, I think it is an important thing to sort of put across and focus on the positives of solitary experiences, which is what for the most part, my pagan path has been. I have been interested in and had certain sets of beliefs and have been pursuing paganism in one form or another for as long as I can remember. Me and my sister talked about this sort of thing when we were young. I mean, I think I was maybe 13, 12 when we first broached the subject with each other, but before then there was other bits and pieces that were pagan in. I had always believed in the 4 elements, for example. I'd always spoken to a mother, you know, so it all tied back in. And the 4 Queens had a video where she was saying, like, even in her earliest interactions with medium witches, she would like look up to them. I was exactly the same. And the one I really remember is Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, and she had a crow, which I loved, and it all ties into Morrigan now. And she had this staff, and it was like a long thin staff with a green orb on, and I used to pretend a broom handle was without a head on was the staff, and I would do the finger motion over the top that she did when the orb swirled and she could see things in it. And even to this day, if I'm drawing like staffs for whatever reason, that's the automatic thing I draw. And there's the movie, a Tim Burton movie. I can't wait for that. I'm going to go see Oz. I'm going to go see Oz Saturday. I'm going to go see Oz Saturday. I'm not even slightly remotely excited. Completely off topic slightly. Just slot it in there. Right. So I'd always looked up to witches. I found them fascinating, I found them interesting, I found them intriguing, I found the very word witch exciting, and that meant I embarked on a solitary path. So, for a long time, well, not a long time, there are people who've been doing it twice as long as me, but I was reading a little bit from the age of 12, 13, and I seriously started studying 2004. Is when I first started seriously studying. I mean, I've read bits and pieces all over the place and I was fairly knowledgeable, but at that point I started really studying. Now, I have for the most part been completely solitary, and I love being solitary, and I think maybe where the first place is to stop like crossing off some misconceptions about being solitary. Solitary doesn't mean by yourself completely, and it doesn't mean completely alone. It's not like a lot of people think it's lonely and like antisocial or something. That's not the case at all. Me and my sister talk about all sorts of pagan and every day. We phone each other probably every day. And we discuss and chat, and people will come talk to me about different aspects of paganism and whatnot, and always have. Right since I began, I would have discussions and conversations with people in life. One of the very first things I did quite early on was join a pagan group, forum in fact, online. Now the thing with forums is that sometimes they can get the really negative group dynamics, and if you don't feel comfortable in a group online in a forum, then leave it. But I joined the whitegoddess.co.uk and it was always really welcoming. There were people on there that sometimes I didn't agree with, but points of view were always allowed to be expressed. There was always discussion, there was always debate. It was never picking on anybody, and like I think this is the key point. There are going to be people online or in groups or whatever that you disagree with at some point, because we're not all the same and we're never going to be all the same. But if they express a view which is horrendous to you and everybody jumps on board and like anyone who disagrees is like slapped down, then that's not a group you want to be part of. But if they express a view which you really don't agree with, and then other people are a bit, I don't agree with that, or let's discuss it, or let's debate it, or let's get to the nitty gritty, or why do you think that? And I mean, there's ways of deconstructing ideas and theories, and that's a positive, because you're learning to take on board ideas that are not your own. You are taking on board the ability to critique other people's beliefs, and you get a sense of what feels right to you and what feels wrong to you. The other thing I think is great for solitary, is the lack of dictation. You will hear so many people say, find what resonates with you. And for beginners, this can be a hugely daunting sentence. Like, that didn't help me at all. What on earth do you mean, what resonates with me? I don't know. What the great thing about being solitary is you don't have anybody dictating to you what you should and shouldn't be doing, what you should and shouldn't be reading, where you should and you shouldn't start. A lot of people that I've known have started their journey into witchcraft through Wicca. Some stay with it, some don't stay with it, some leave it completely, some sort of take on board things that they have learnt from that and then evolve. I'm the final one. Like, I celebrate the Wheel of the Year. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think it's I can't even, it's just integral to who I am now. It's celebrating the seasons, the goddess, spirituality. It's taking on board what's going on in nature. It's using symbolism. There's a ritual, which I enjoy ritual. Some people really hate it, but I think it can be a moving experience. And I've incorporated the Wheel of the Year and celebrating it into my path. Excuse me. Itch the chin. So, nobody can tell you which books you should and shouldn't read. And you begin to learn a lot easier how to a lot easier. Is that the right way of phrasing it? it becomes more apparent to you quicker, more easily, what feels right to you as you read and what doesn't. And you know, you get drawn to certain books, say, and unfortunately a lot of my books have gone astray, shall we say. But although I do have some of my first books, like the one is actually behind me. You see where the candle is there, and you go, boop, there. It's The Craft by Dorothy Morrison. I can see it in the video camera. This is one of the first books I ever read, and it spoke to me. I loved the way she was so enthusiastic. I loved some of the poetry in there. I loved some of the ways that she put things. It's a fairly simplistic book, and it's also called The Craft rather than Wicca per se. And like a lot of the early books are Wicca, and that's why a lot of people start off in Wicca, because it's just more readily available. And that's not to the detriment of Wicca at all. I mean, I would argue with anybody who argues against Wicca in its entirety. There might be parts that you don't agree with. There might be certain structures that you have arisen as a result, as always does with religion, that you don't like, and that's fine if you pinpoint it. But just dismissing the whole religion out of hand is ridiculous, and that seems to have happened quite a bit on recently. Oh, Wicca. It's like, whatever. Okay. When Wicca has actually sort of paved the way. I'm going to have another sip of water. It has opened up the acceptability of paganism in the mainstream, and like a lot of people who have nothing to do with paganism are aware of what Wicca is. They might have the wrong idea, but they'll have heard of Wicca. They will have heard of it. So because there are a lot of books available, it opens up sort of the availability of investigation. Now, as a solitary, you can take a book and you can underline the things that matter to you as you read in them, like, that hits home somehow. That's resonating with you. And through the process, and it's actually quite scary, because quite a lot of the time you don't get told that it's perfectly alright for you to not agree with some certain sentiments. And it worries me that people might read different books and think these differ so wildly. What's more accurate, and what's the truth? And the whole point is, it's you as an investigator. Investigate, learn, try things out, try meditations out that you read about that sit well with you. If you read something and you think it's beautiful and you think it's accurate, then just write it down. And write everything down that resonates with you. If you see a recipe and you think, I'd like to try that, or that's something I might like to do down the line, or one day I'd love to be able to make my own whatever oils. You write it all down. Write it all down, and at the very end of it, you've got the beginning of your book of shadows without even thinking about it. And the great thing about being solitary in this regard is nobody can tell you what books you should and shouldn't read. I mean, you can find recommendations all over the internet, but sometimes the very best thing to do, and this is what I did at the very start of my path, is I would go into the local pagan shop. You might not have a local pagan shop, which is a shame, because a lot of the actual shops have shut down. But I did. You might just be able to go into a library, because they do tend to have, I don't know what they call them, metaphysical sections, or you could go into a Waterstones and they will have a section. And just feel out which book resonates with you, like which cover looks interesting, and then you read the back. It's the same with any book, right? And you would, what feels good. Now, everybody in their right mind, that sounds a bit odd, everybody in their right mind is going to have a favourite author. The first authors that resonated with them and they enjoyed and spoke to them. Now, I have two. I have Dorothy Morrison and Scott Cunningham. And Scott Cunningham is going to be a major one for a lot of people because he writes amazingly. He has a very matter-of-fact sensibility, and he writes in depth on a lot of subjects. So you go to Scott Cunningham and he has this book, this book, this book, this book, this book, and he has a Wicca, and then he has herbs, and then he has stones, and then he has incenses, and he has magic in the home, and dreaming, and then there's a book on the elements, and there's loads, and you're like, this guy, I like this guy, and he's got all these books, mine, and when you start, and you're so excited, you will absorb books like there is no tomorrow. You don't read them, you just like, you will absorb them. It's just a fantastic, it's really exciting when people are new and excited to it. It's a wonderful energy, and some people are really arsey with the newbies, like, it's just like they have that energy, they have that enthusiasm. That's amazing. If we could all maintain that enthusiasm permanently, we'd be so much better off. So the brilliant thing about that is that you can take whatever book you fancy, and no one can tell you, it's not, you know, no one can put a downer on your research, on your reading, on your practice. And that's true in every aspect of your practice, whether you're just starting out or whether you're further along or whether you decide to make changes. Like, there is at no certain point, if you decide or you have an epiphany that something is no longer for you, you have outgrown it, or something is revealed to you and it makes more sense to you, or you've decided, I don't know, what's the best example I can give from? Okay, well, when I've, you know, first had it revealed to me that the Morrigan might be my matron goddess and Celtic witchcraft was something I might want to pursue, the general public view of the Morrigan is not who she really is. Like, people don't really know who she is and they have a negative outlook on her. And if I'd have had like all these people around me being like, oh, I don't know. I mean, my sister was like, are you sure you want to do this? I've heard she's a bit negative. I'm like, your matron goddess is heck out. There is the exact same stuff out there about her. But if I could have, at that point, I could have been put off by general negative opinion. And I wasn't, because it was just me. And I was like, no, this gets set in my chest, gets me feeling, it makes sense, it works. Investigate. And it's like coming home again, all over again. The more I learn, the more interesting it is, the more of the poems I read, more of the stuff. It's just fab. And that has started to open doorways for me, spiritually, and meeting people who have also had the call. Which is great. So because I was solitary, nobody could put a downer on that for me. I can engage with the material without any preconceived notions. And preconceived notions and judgment is a real problem in society as a whole, and never mind in groups. You know, you can't have someone saying, I worship this box, so because you're in my group, you're not allowed to go outside this box, or what you believe is somehow lesser than mine. You can't have anybody put value judgments on your path. And solitary doesn't mean alone. Like I said, you know, you can engage with people, you can talk to people, there are forums, there's YouTube, there's books, there's meetings and moots and things where you can go meet people should you wish to. But if you don't want to, then you, as a solitary, you're not obliged. And there's something wonderful about taking obligation out of religion. Because I think the minute you feel obliged to do something, it's like you have to do something, and it's ugh, and it brings it down. And it's like, rather than feeling like, oh yes, tonight I'm going to do this, or oh, I'm going to get to try this herb, or I'm going to have my absolutely fabulous witchy cabinet turn up. Did I mention I love it? It's sat here, so it cheers me up all day long. So, you know, nobody can tell you that you shouldn't be engaging with something, that you shouldn't try something out, that if you, you know, I mean, on balance, if you need someone to give you gratification, like tell you you're doing something right, that's a more difficult thing in solitary. But then I think personally it's worth being solitary for that very purpose, that you have to learn to teach yourself, you have to learn to regulate yourself. Not that. You have to learn to reward yourself and listen to yourself. So you have to become your own friend, basically. And I actually had this the other day, that I was organising some papers, and at somewhere in there I had written, I really want to learn to make candles, and it must have been bloody years old. And I was like, now I can do that. Now I do that. And I don't fear it. And at some point in the past I'd written down, I really want to do this, but I don't know if I can do this. And now I know I can. And it's wonderful, because you then look back and think, at that point I was worried about doing it. Now I know I can do it. And that's the sort of self-reward, you know, you've learnt that. You can now do that. And sometimes pushing yourself to learn a new skill, whether it be within the pagan path or not, can be a really rewarding thing, because then you are growing and learning and changing and evolving and doing things that you set out to do, even if you didn't think you could do them. And at that point you don't need anyone else to tell you congratulations. You have that self-epiphany, that pride, and that's great. You know, you don't need anyone else to tell you, because you've done it, and then you can tell yourself. And it's just like self-sustaining and self-confidence. That's not to say you don't go out and share things, right? Because I share things all the time. I am on the phone talking to people about things. You know, we share ideas. And which crystal would you do this for? And yada 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 yada. How is this? And how is this? And that's sharing experiences. And sometimes someone will say to me, oh, I would have used meh instead. And I'm like, well, and I'm like, it's great. I wouldn't have. I would have done it my way. And I find it really, really fascinating. I've said this before, how different witches approach things. But that's an amazing learning experience, right? Because you can see how other people have done it. And if you don't like how they did it, you don't have to say you don't like how they did it, because you're solitary. Like, if you're in a group and you have to do circle a certain way and you don't like how something is being said, right? Say you don't like the invocations to the elements, say you, or goddess, say you don't like the words, say you don't like the music, and you don't get a say because you're not high enough up in the hierarchy, and it kind of ruins the whole spiritual experience for you. And well, that's not something that ever happens in solitary. You write your own calling the quarters chants, like I have in the past. You can do the visualizations however you want. And what I used to say in my pagan forum place, and I think I've said it on here before, is I really didn't like the way a lot of the books described visualizing the elements in circle, because you'd have like watchtowers, generally speaking, in a lot of the books. So like physical buildings. I think it was nearly always that. Can't remember any others. I was like, no. Like, this is me from birth. New. And how I do it is I visualize them as trees. So when I'm calling on earth, I visualize a full giant pine tree, and you can smell the pine, and it might be decorated with signs of Yule. So it might have like fairy lights on, or it might have tinsel on, or it might have like pine cones made into ornaments hanging up, things like that, right? And that makes sense because North and Earth is in the sort of the winter correspondence. I knew it was in there somewhere. And then air would be a sakura tree, a Japanese cherry tree, and all the little, because it's in spring, because all of the little petals will then float off in the breeze, and you can see the movement through that tree really beautifully. It's very light. And then, depending on my mood, fire changes. Fire would either be a great big massive oak in the midst of summer, with this heat blazing down on it, and the leaves all like sort of shimmering in the sunlight, or possibly if I'm doing a night ritual, I sometimes visualize it as a great big oak on a hill, and then on another hill you can see a bonfire, and you get both smells. Sometimes I do like a more tropical tree, like a fruit tree or something like that. And just it's I can't tell you why that one changes. It just does sometimes. Maybe it's because I love fire, and fire is my element that I work with more than any other. I think that's fair. I love the element of fire. It's so great. And I think maybe I'm a little bit pink in the face because I feel like because I work with it so much, I sort of see its different dimensions a bit more. So does that make sense? And then water is a beautiful weeping willow tree that all droops down into the water and has that curve like water. And then spirit would be a crystal tree, like a tree made of crystal, and generally it's silver and purple, refracting light. And that's how I visualize and call on each quarter, and I have always done it like that. And I never read that anywhere. And when I said that's how I did it on my forum, a lot of people were like, "That's amazing! Can I use that?" And I was like, "Go for it." Because it makes more sense to me on a pagan path to use trees than it does, say, towers. That's just me feeling out what was right for me, and I have always used that, and I always will. There are other examples, but I think that's the best one, like that. And no one can tell me that's wrong, because that worked for me. That resonated with me, and that felt good, that felt right. I can see him in my mind's eye even as I'm talking to the camera, rather than being in a circle with full energy up and visualizing. I can see them in my mind's eye just chatting, so I know that they are right for me because I can feel them. Resonates. So no one can tell you that's wrong. And if someone had told me that was wrong, I would have been horrified. Like, I would. I mean, now I wouldn't be horrified. I'd be like, that's very short-sighted of you. And if it's right for me and it resonates with me, then it is right for me. It doesn't have to be right for you. And if you're happy with your towers, then you go. If I'm in a hurry, sometimes I do spirals, like a fire spiral and an air spiral and a water spiral. The trees will still come into it, but if I'm like bump, 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 for whatever reason. Usually when I've had a nightmare, that's what happens. Like if I sit up in bed and I've had a nightmare and I call them like bang. That's usually spirals. That's a different one. So, yeah. So as a solitary, you have that creative license. right? You can write your own spells, you can write your own, I mean, you can do this anyway, but you can write your own spells, you can write your own invocations, you can write your own words, you can write your own poetry, you can set up your altar however you want, you can set your spells up however you want. It's all on you and your personality and your, like I mentioned the other day, your relationship with deity is your manifest through your creativity, through your words, your actions, your way of doing things, your way of using energy, and no one can crush your artistic license. No one can tell you you're wrong. And just because, and you learn as well that to know not to doubt yourself. At first, everybody does when they're doing something new. And that's okay, you can doubt yourself. You can question it, and that's fine, because you should question every single thing that you learn and do, and only incorporate something into your practice when you feel that it's right for you. And that brings up another point. You can't have anyone tell you that you have to do it this way. And what if that feels wrong? You have to do this spell, but I don't want to. You have to do it this way. Well, I don't want to. And then you feel guilty, and then you feel negative, and it's bringing negativity into your learning experience. So I had a quote on my Facebook the other day, and I had one that I made up and one that was Elizabeth Jennings. Oh God, I can't believe I can't remember. Where are you? Where are you, my little lion? Elizabeth Kenny. It is better to be a lion for a day than a sheep all your life. And I said, in a group of nodding heads, hatred easily spreads. And the whole thought process that was going on behind that is that it's perfectly acceptable to be an individual. Somewhere in society, along the way somewhere, and in every walk of life, it has somehow become less acceptable to accept your individuality. Like your Billy no mates, like you've got no friends, like if you know who you are, then you don't fit into the whole. And to be honest with you, I would rather be an individual than fit into any mold. I know who I am, and I've got to the point where I can live with who I am. And it's a really difficult, and it's probably a lifelong process. There's still going to be things that I don't like about myself, and things I try and change, things I try and improve, things I try to be a better person, because nobody is, and nobody ever will be perfect, right? And I hate it when people say this, because it's like there's no such thing. Like, apart from anything, what ideal are you going on? Like, should a perfect person be what? And who gets to say that? But I have things which I consider negative traits in myself. I'm very, very impatient, for example. I need things to get done and sorted and organised. I don't like waiting. I'm terrible. And when I'm waiting for something in the mail and it doesn't show up, I'm like... Or when things don't work out, I ordered something and it came today, and it was less than satisfactory, and it kind of put a downer on my whole morning. And I'm actually emailed the people and getting it sorted and getting it fixed. So, but yeah, but everybody has things about themselves which they want to change, and so they can grow. Especially in a pagan path, that's fine to be able to do that. You don't need someone else telling you there are things wrong with yourself and being condescending about it, and like, especially if people don't have enough tact to put it, you know. I've had people say stuff to me like, when I first meet like a lot of people, I'm not good at it. I don't like meeting big groups of people in one go, and I go shy, and I go quiet. And I have tried to work on this, but huge groups of people, and I'm like, and I've had people tell me I'm standoffish because of that, because I'm quiet and shy. And it's not that I'm being rude, and it's not that I don't want to talk to them, it's that I'm shy in huge groups of people. And People telling me I was standoffish was not helpful. It did not make me feel any more inclined to go into big groups of people. It didn't help. And, you know, sometimes you can get situations in groups which don't help you grow. And at least the only person you can blame, you know, solitary path, is yourself. if things go really badly wrong, it's your fault, you know, and it's not that. And if you didn't try hard enough, well, that's on you, and you need to buck up next time, rather than if someone else didn't bother. That can be hugely frustrating. I'm going to stop soon because we're at the 35-minute mark. I could probably go on forever, but I probably could go on forever. But basically, embrace the joys if you're going to be solitary. I would advise, if you've come from an organized religion that you've maybe had some negative experiences with, and then you've moved into paganism, or like you've discovered paganism and it has resonated with you more than an organized religion, be solitary at least for a little while, because you're allowing yourself to discover before you're allowing everyone else to tell you how it should be. And I think it's much more rewarding to at least start that way. If you want to evolve and go and find a group, go for it, you know. But I would advise anybody to start learning by themselves. By all means, utilize every person's experiences, videos, knowledge, books, but bear in mind that you must always have a pinch of salt on hand, because they are personal experiences. And just because someone can write a book, make a video, it doesn't make them right, and it doesn't make them wholly right either. If you can glean things which make sense to you and help you grow, and you can take them into your practice and they bring that joy into your practice, then grab onto them. But don't think everything anybody says is just perfect. It doesn't exist. So this was going to be a short. It's not short. This was an extensive video with Joey Morris. Right, so that's going to be it for the joys of being solitary for this video. I think we've yabbered on quite long enough for one morning. Let's go do something productive. Many blessings, everybody.